So did we? Oh no, you didn't finish last year. Yeah, we lost one. That's not fair.
Okay, so Rutger.
All right. One reason why I'm participating in this group is because I was asked to do a literature study and basically provide the input for some technical basis based on the current status in the scientific research world. So that the forest management for the sake of the water is based on some concepts that are defensible out there in the scientific world. And as I pointed out several months ago, in my opinion, our whole concept about how the water flows in these watersheds is a little bit outdated. It's just too limited. It's not doing justice to the complexity of the entire system. And that all being said, now it's time to bring up the proof. So what I'm doing now is going through the hydrologic literature and to see what do people this day and age think about how groundwater recharge happens, how groundwater gets back into the surface water system, what's the meaning of base flow, regional flow systems, and the nature of recharge, groundwater recharge. So I try to put this together into two short sentences. What I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to establish. So it's basically develop a conceptual hydrologic model as a basis for integrated water and forest management. That should be applicable anywhere in the world, well, provided in a similar type of climate system as we are here in California. But I just noticed already that a lot of the literature that's out there where people have worked on these problems does not necessarily is in an area that is similar to ours. So it's somewhat similar, but it's
space part.
Different climate. For example, a lot of work has been done in Utah, the Wasatch Mountains. And well, is it similar to what we have in the Sierra Nevada? Not sure. We do have cold winters and lots of snow, but they talk about the semi-arid climate over there. Are we a semi-arid climate around here? I'm tempted to say yes, we are with respect to certain aspects. Okay. So what I was trying to envision in this is the objective to develop certain data collection protocols so we have a sound basis for, when I say hydrologic modeling, I mean mostly hypothesis testing. It does not necessarily have to come immediately to running huge computer programs when I say hydrologic modeling. I believe more we should first develop hypotheses and test those and then go from there and see what next step we can take. And it's the kind of stuff that will need cooperation from academia, outside expertise to help us with. Now, so what I've come around here, I'm just going to give you a little overview, the type of general topics that I've seen are important. So forest hydrology, I should say, intermediate and high elevation forest hydrology. I just see issues of groundwater recharge, groundwater management in the forest watersheds. We need to see what kind of hydrologic models people develop, and again say conceptual model as well as actual quantitative modeling. Then the entire issue of bedrock hydrology, which is extremely complex. But there have been some amazing advances made in the last 10, 15 years using noble gas isotopes, stable and light isotopes of water, things like that. And the whole question about water balance, based on stream-groundwater interaction. Hill slope hydrology versus steep groundwater population. I see an overly strong emphasis, so-called hill slope hydrology, and not yet seen what's happening to the deeper rock bodies, deep rock groundwater populations happening, which might eventually become important for base flow, lake year base flow.
What's MBR mean again?
Okay, that is so-called mountain block recharge. That's the term that has cropped up lately, and I'm going to show you a little cartoon later on to explain it a little bit more. We measure this regional groundwater flow. I don't know if it exists in the series, but then the big question about forest canopy and the effect on water balance. That was part of my earlier proposal. It is not an easy one to solve. Vegetation water use and the entire question of fire and forest. So I'm trying to make sure I'm not going to spread too far, because there's this hell of a lot of literature out there. It just becomes overwhelming. So I just got to somehow narrow this down a little bit, at least for now, to come to a comprehensive picture with respect to certain aspects. And we'll see how we can expand from there. So, to me, the biggest question is the water balance, its effect by the vegetation, and possibly climate change. I don't know, I didn't even mention it, but so.
Let's step back to our earlier conversation. Climate change is integrating into everything.
It's sort of the big elephant in the room. Nobody wants to deal with it. But I guess maybe we should just wait until it happens. It already happens.
Wait until it's over and then try to measure it. Should we still be around?
End of the files, I can see.
Oh, okay, that's the end of the page. Okay, so. Okay.
Oh, go back up.
Okay. All right. You see, there's this little cartoon that I prepared to explain these big concepts. Typically, what we see, most of you in the Great Basin, going all the way from California border all the way up to Utah, over to parts of doesn't even go to Colorado. But we see these mountain blocks that are sitting in the middle of these basins that are filled up with debris that's been washed down from the mountain blocks. So then people have developed these concepts about mountain block recharge and mountain front recharge, MFR, MBR. And mountain block, you just basically see recharge happening in the high country. But the soils are thin, if not non-existent, and find ways to go through bedrock fractures into the deeper system and eventually start discharging into the basin adjacent. And by comparison, mountain front recharge is more like water running off from the thin soils in the bedrock areas, not finding much opportunity to percolate deep. And it's running off into shallow washes and percolating into the ground right off the front end. I say the bedrock features meet the basin. And so those two terms have been used more and more lately. I find this very useful in the sense it might apply a little bit into Ceres too, because we do have many areas with glacier deposits and lake deposits and so on, alluvial fan deposits that sit next to these big bedrock outcrops. Okay. Okay. Hydrologic balance. Just want to point out, you will probably know what the hydrologic balance is. Precipitation is the sum total of evapotranspiration, runoff, groundwater flow, and groundwater storage, change in groundwater storage. And it's one of these issues of groundwater storage. Many times you find people that say, we've been pumping here for 30 years in this valley, and the wells are still not going dry, so we must have an endless supply of water. But what's actually happening is you're pumping from storage. And, as soon as the storage has been depleted adequately, then we really start to see the decline in water levels. That's probably what we see in the Central Valley Africa. And another thing I want to like to introduce is the term of interflow. In this case, the sum of runoff and groundwater flow. So basically, you would probably, in some cases, you would like to reduce the runoff a little bit in favor of groundwater flow, because you can store the water better underground than in the stream. Now, you probably don't want to do that in a way. It can be argued you're working the system, but you can see it another way, that you say the system has been changed through climate change and forest management's practice in the last 2 years, that you would like to shift the balance back towards groundwater flow underground. So those are kind of things that I'm looking at in the literature too. If there's any discussion about that.
So can I ask a question? There's more and more competition for the water we see in the surface flows, and I mean the balance between the environment and the users, whether they be municipal or whoever. If you're trying to increase the groundwater flow, it seems like that competition just gets more intense.
Yeah, I mean, the lawsuit I'm working on for people in the Delta right now, it has to do with Bureau of Reclamation storing water at Shasta. They store it for a period of time, so it becomes their water. They release the water down the river. And because of the groundwater pumping in the Sacramento Valley, the water they're releasing is running into the groundwater out of the surface flow of the stream. They think there's somebody stealing it from them. You know, you appear in court and you ask the question, do you have any measuring device that tells you that that water is actually getting to the delta to be used? And they just look at you, and it just says, God. I mean, the whole connection between surface flow and groundwater flow is understood at the conceptual level. Nobody can measure it. Nobody does measure it. It's never been important. And they've depleted the groundwater, and within the last 50 years, when you carbon date the water, or whatever you use, you find out that it's thousands of years old. So, I mean, we're just doing in a slanted surface what they're trying to figure out everywhere. I mean, it's harder because you have to decide if you begin to lose it out of the bulletin 113 zones, did you actually lose it? Or has it always crept out of Sierra Valley and ended up in Vina? Has Calvis finished his work for us?
No, it'll, 2016, we'll have the first good look at the Sierra Valley Basin anyway. Okay, are you pretty well done? That's where he is right now.
Well, it's important. You know, I mean, I would argue that we can't wait to figure it all out before we take action. Because we're not on a timetable in which we can do that, but we need every bit of information we can get to know how to respond to, is the money being used effectively?
Well, that's kind of the project you were discussing. I'm a little bit concerned that there should be some sort of a data protocol going on while the project is going. What you do,
Right.
quantities that have been taken out, any type of way of measuring the hydrological system.
Right, and the description of that would be extraordinarily valuable in terms of fine-tuning any project. But the idea is, it is very hard to measure differences if there aren't differences. So you have to do something to be able to measure.
This is really important. I remember the guy from TWR sitting up here. He laid out all this, all the different units for which he was collecting data. And at the end I said to him, so how much of the bottom flow are you getting with all that modeling at all those units? And if I remember correctly, he said, about 45 or 50%. And I thought, oh, okay, so you're getting all the surface flow, but you're missing half
Right.
of the flow.
Right.
And that then pulls it right back into forestry in terms of what gets drawn out and how, and that's why what you're proposing, what you're suggesting here is really critical, just really critical.
So that's why it's part of this study, and that's why we have the approach to Marion Creek. We're going to have an approach that is going to be in Beatty Land with Bales, and then we're going to have this. So we'll have a number of perspectives. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kurt. Okay, so this is the last thing before we had a question about why is there a special category of WUI called the watershed WUI? And so this is a question that I struggled with and had some concern with the other work groups about integrated projects, and came up with a definition that we'll have to circulate to a larger group probably on the integration meeting, which is that that rim around these valleys that we're calling the WUI has tremendous importance to local groundwater wells and to agricultural diversions downstream. And so I drafted a definition that I'd like some feedback on over the next month about why this watershed WUI definition is important and why we should keep it in our 7 strategies. And basically it's talking about the fact that this is the recharge area for local wells and municipal wells and our actual little populace in this region, which generally sends water to every place else but California, but certain parts of it are important to us. And we have 40% of our population that's on domestic wells or wells like Quincy CSD or these other wells that are in the forested areas that rely on forest management indirectly. So that was the notion of this watershed.
I mean, how do you, I'm trying to figure out
where those are.
No, I'm trying to figure out why it's not 90%. I mean,
Well, some of the agricultural people pull off the surface diversions, and some of like Great Eagle Land and Water serves communities with surface diversions, and so there is some surface diversions, but most of our population relies on groundwater. We're going to focus in on what that number really is, but it was at least 40%, maybe 60%.
Yeah, it's probably higher.
yeah, I mean, because certainly Quincy is groundwater. Greenville is groundwater.
But which rights to surface water, but
Well, Well, they have rights, but they don't,
They don't use it.
they obviously don't use it.
Not too much.
Portals and mix.
Portola's a mix,
I mean, they spill it.
Grey
That's
goes a
their
mix,
use, is they give it away.
Gragel's a mix.
Right.
You know, so it is mixed, but, you know, I would say most of it is groundwater, and we haven't paid any attention to it.
Right. So, are we using the word WUI because it links up with, I mean, I've just never seen it used.
It's
I
a
mean,
forest
usually
term.
it's recharge zones.
Well, it's water, it's wildland urban interface, it's that fire safe council zone around communities.
Well, I know, and so I guess you'd have to explain WUI.
Okay, so that's this big map, okay, these
Okay.
big lines, but out of that, Boyle Ravine would jump out
Mm-hmm.
as a piece of that that's really, really critical for Quincy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were thinking about community well protection,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be the whole WUI, you'd be looking right at Boyle Ravine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what this is to tease out. Okay, and if you have an agricultural supply well right at the bottom of something, you might be looking at another ravine. You might be looking at sections of this that are really important for local use, that aren't just part of the whole hydrologic cycle that ends up in the central
So
valley.
I mean, I agree that this is a wonderful thing to be doing. What I'm trying to get is how it becomes why it's a WWUI rather than a critical recharge zone.
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't done all the studies to identify them. So we know it's somewhere in that WUI zone, but we don't know exactly where it is.
I get it.
You know, and as that study, we have this well vulnerability study that will probably start in December. We'll really start focusing in on, for each of these areas, clustered community wells or Quincy or our cities, where are they getting the water? And where do we really need to focus?
There's a point in here, I'm not debating about the importance of this, and this may just show my ignorance, but there's a part here that assumes that the catchment of that area is the most important part when it may be much bigger.
That's the part we don't know.
So, because of that, there's an implied notion of understanding here, which may not exist. That the larger forested area, much larger landscape, so there are some areas we can say, this is the catchment area, we're clear about that. But there's other areas where you say, there's a whole lot more landscape that ought to be included, and this may overly narrow what we really need to be focused on.
That's why it's called watershed WUI, because we don't know if it's, most of the population's living in that WUI zone, but we don't know if the catchment for that water supply is confined to that zone.
Okay, so if you're talking about catchment, then I go back to terminology here. So WUI pushes us into a particular area because of its sort of predetermined definition of wildland urban interface. And that places us in a fairly well-defined now from a forest standpoint, but it may not relate from a water standpoint.
Well, and that
That's
was the
all.
whole point of
Right.
throwing this other definition, whatever we call it, that's not a line that's that easy. It's not the general
Right.
forest, it's something that's really tied to the needs of a community.
So last comment, I don't think we want to narrow, particularly if we're talking larger watershed landscape, forest landscape, then I don't think I think there's value in doing this in terms of where folks are located who are drawing water, but let's not confuse that with those who are drawing where the majority of the population is with the majority of the catchment basin.
Okay, so, all right, so you're saying that the title's wrong.
I think I would agree.
Okay,
I
so
would
what
agree
would you
with political-
call, all right,
yeah.
give me something, because it's one,
Well, why not call it watershed recharge / WUI?
okay, that's a good,
If there's already terms out there to define it, why redefine it?
I don't know, I mean, that's what we're struggling
That's
with.
sort of what I'm getting
Isn't
at.
it
It's a catchment base.
Community catchment bank? No, community well.
well,
I'm stuck, because I didn't know, you understand what I'm trying to
about
get my
recharge?
hands around, but what's
Yeah.
the name of it?
what's about
It's called recharge area.
the community recharge zone?
Community recharge zone?
Well, that's what they use, I think, don't they, for the wellhead program? They take immediate 100 feet or whatever.
Well, what they do is they just look at the parameters parameters of the output when it is established. Estimate roughly how long does it take for water particles to migrate towards the well. Say let's give it a zone, say 60 years or so. So if any contaminant within that zone would take, outside that zone would take 60 years to get happy. It's inside that, and that zone needs to be protected.
All right, well, I'm just looking for a title and a placeholder.
Yeah,
Community recharge zone's good enough for me.
In your
it's not just community
objectives,
though, because it's ag.
in your
So-
objectives, you're using groundwater recharge areas, right? That's the
That's
terminology
what I
that
would,
you're,
I would say.
Yeah, that's
you're
one
using in your
That's
objectives.
fine, and that takes care of John's thing about the agricultural.
Capture zones, that's what.
Groundwater recharge zone?
I'd stick with the terminology that you're already using in your objectives. I wouldn't try to redefine.
Right,
The terminology
Which
is using
objectives?
in the
I'm lost.
and the objectives.
capture zones.
Well, I'm just looking at, it says groundwater recharge areas.
And where, what page?
Shoot, it's in your objective. It was in that table with all the X's.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Recharge areas.
All right, so keep the definition, you understand what I'm, but rename
Right.
it
And
groundwater.
this did come up on the general plan update, about protecting the groundwater recharge areas. And it's a little scary because we don't really know where they are, and to a certain extent,
It might be my garden, my wife's garden.
yeah, my garden, that's what made me nervous about it. I'm going, wait a second here, I'm watching that rainfall and say we got 40 inches, and I'm going, how much hit the street? Well, not a lot. Now, last year, you had to dig down about that deep and it's dry, but that's the thing that we got concerned about because we have communities potentially within those areas. How do you deal with that?
How do you
From a
deal with
planning
the zoning
standpoint?
when one should?
Yeah, using the word.
Where we include all development and groundwater recharge areas, you go, whoa, I just scared myself to death, I might as well go leave the country.
Using the WWUI terminology unnecessarily confabulates the WUI, which has been set up for specific purposes
That don't have anything to do with water.
under federal law. That really just indirectly might have something to do with water, but not very much.
All right.
Primarily forestry, so.
Keep the
get
WUI,
it out.
call this groundwater protection zone, okay, done, thank you very much.
And John knows this, I was in the Fire Safe Council when it was decided to expand the WUIs
Right.
in Plymouth County, which they're a lot bigger than normally which you would define them as, and in the watershed, and it worked, and it met all the standards, and it was a good idea, but
But
you
it might be-
usually don't have them defined that big.
It might be a bad idea to slap the
Water.
WWUI.
Okay.
That's just,
Because they're
All
so
right,
big.
thank you, I need that direction. Okay, last topic and let's get out of here. Okay, we're supposed to answer these questions. We can go through really fast and say, don't know.
Well, how about if we, the first cut, we all decide yes or no?
Yeah.
And then we add whatever we have to the
Okay.
second cut. So one, are forest habitats changing due to a shift in spring runoff? Yes.
Wait, are we answering these questions for this geographic area specifically?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so number one, have we got a yes?
I haven't seen habitat shifts per se.
Oh,
I've seen forest parts or individual trees and stands die.
There's a
critters
research
are moving north.
study
haven't seen any meadows.
that we're getting on the website, a summary of current trends and probable future trends in climate-driven processes in the Sierra Cascade Province, including Lassing, Modoc, and Plymouth National Forest. Kyle Merriam was a major author of this.
lives here in town.
Works here in town, and it's looking at weather data and those kinds of trends. And so it'll be on the, it's gonna be, if it's not on the website now, it will be
And-
shortly.
How would that?
She would say yes.
She would say yes.
Yes, for sure. And the first one that came along, I think, was pica. That was the
Right.
first indicator species that they started moving uphill a little bit.
Birds are moving up,
Birds
for
are
sure.
Birds are moving.
And forests are actually migrating.
Little oaks are dying off, and oak trees are actually the
Yes.
other ones are coming up.
Yes.
Okay, so number one is yes, number two?
Well, what resources are available?
Well, let's come back to more complicated things. Let's get an answer on each
Does the
one of these.
region rely on,
Yes.
okay, yes.
Does your region include aquatic habitats vulnerable
Yes.
to wildfire-related erosion? Yes.
I think.
Okay,
Are some in-stream flow requirements in your region known to be either currently
Wait,
insufficient?
I wonder, there was 2 questions in number 3.
Yes.
I don't think we've seen enough of the mud cycle to call it a mud cycle.
Well,
you have in the
see,
canyon.
I figured we were gonna be, if we get the first answer and then come back to argue the rest,
We can quibble with
we would, it might be faster. Are some in-stream flow requirements in your region known to be there currently insufficient to support? Yes. Are riparian corridors or in-stream migration or passage problems an ongoing increasing issue?
That's a fact.
Yes. Are forest habitats changing due to increasingly catastrophic wildfire frequencies? Yes. Are forest habitats changing due to a shift in spring runoff or a shift from snow to rain? Yes. Okay. So they're all yes.
Well, are there any more questions?
Yeah.
Major questions?
Back to 1. What resources are available to track those changes? Mr. Miriam's report.
That's one.
Ms.
Ms. Miriam's report. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she does have a,
Should have realized if it was complete and efficient, it was a Ms.
Very
Just goes
good,
up-
Michael, that was the
Michael,
right
she just
answer.
goes up the street, she walks by my office
Okay,
quite
great.
frequently.
but Kyle could be either a boy or a girl, so let's.
Right, no,
And she presented with Gary Freeman, it was quite an event, it's really good.
great.
Okay, go ahead.
And you might know some other data that would fit with the,
There's not enough resources
No,
available to
but
track these
we're-
changes, yeah.
yeah, but the point is, we
AM
have some
report, Gary
that
Freeman
can
report,
justify our original yes.
okay. Gary Freeman,
Right.
okay. All right, anything else that we know, Jonathan?
Actually, there's
There's lots.
a whole collection of, I mean, it's part of the lawsuit against DWR at Oroville because they didn't use everything they had. So DWR's got an incredible amount of stuff that I can send you to track it.
Okay, good, okay.
Michael, you wouldn't happen to have a official copy of the appeal brief with this file? I just have a draft, and I can't release the draft. Craig gave me the draft on the brief of this file for the appellant, but I can't release it to the climate change or climate consultants because it has draft. Craig won't let me. You would have to have an email, a PDF version of the
Sure.
one that's stamped by the court.
Does
filed.
that mean that Craig's not gonna let me give it to you?
No.
I mean,
His point was I could release it, but I couldn't release a draft because the copy he sent me, we're not sure was the same copy that actually got filed.
Right.
He may have it someplace, he's a busy man, but if you have it, you can email it to me, because we want to get it to the.
I'm gonna have to get it from Rossman. I mean, I approved the last draft, and that may be what you sent it to Craig. And he approved it, and then.
Send it to the court.
and then
It's
filed
fine
his
with me,
application.
but releasing it, but I can't
Okay, you
release that
guys.
draft because it doesn't have a code.
All right, let's finish this.
Okay, so number 2, if so, what are they? Well, it's every lake, every stream. I mean, Almanor, Antelope, Davis, Buck.
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean, so you guys can
okay,
do the
Even
list
Mountain Meadows, for goodness.
and say something about streams.
okay.
Um,
Fire, flood, mud, yes in the canyon, absolutely.
yeah,
You're right, in the canyon, but really, this is not John McVie and the Fire, Flood, Mud
Hey,
trilogy.
Husel, what about Moonlight? Are you guys seeing anything on your
Not
Is
really
it-
on Moonlight, but on Chips Fire, we had that big
canyon, yeah?
storm cell come over
That's right.
Clear Creek. We had some issues in Clear Creek.
Well, and there's these huge fans that PG&E's been picking up on down in
I
the
mean,
But I
river down.
remember that storm in the Chips fire.
Yeah, so we
Mike Donaldson
could,
side about it.
There's a massive slide in
There's a
Moonlight?
massive downslope.
Yeah, but that's not fire flood mud. That's like
It's
a
not your classic
geomorphic. Yeah, that's
Or deep
that's
seated.
more deep seated. That was going on even before Moonlight.
But when you lost all those roots,
It does
It all moved.
exacerbate. Yeah, it sure does.
All right, so beyond the
Definitely
canyon.
it greases the skin.
Definitely.
yes.
Just out of curiosity, the fire flood mud concept come from us or from?
Comes from the
State.
California Water Plan. They
Right,
talk about
yeah,
that.
because if you,
If you're in the LA Basin, you
yeah,
know
I
about it.
mean, you see it.
Yeah,
About
San
house
Bernardino,
flooders.
Riverside, all that stuff. Okay. Okay, is that enough for you, John, on number 3?
Yeah.
Are we had enough? Okay, number 4?
Just to clarify.
Okay, the only thing I know about is the FERC licenses. That's all I was gonna talk about.
Yeah, so PG&E,
Yeah, you know, those are all governed by,
Forest Service,
you know,
um,
harvesting
How about
plans.
the individual, valley, court,
The decrees?
the decrees?
Well, they're not talking about aquatic species.
Did they talk at all about in-stream flow?
They're talking about the stream flow.
They talk about
not-
diversion
not the
rights.
ones
No,
I read.
it wasn't tied to in-stream flow. That was the problem back in the early
Right.
1900s.
Stream flow wasn't even part of the consideration.
So they have diversion rights that exceed in-stream flows.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they divide it more water than there is.
Right, which the whole state did.
So just yes. And no one is responsible.
Who is responsible for monitoring
one.
and enforcing those requirements?
No one.
The State Water Board theoretically, right?
The Regional Water Quality Control Board theoretically,
But they
but they don't.
But our view
don't.
is
They don't.
nobody, right?
Right.
This is about what
Our
we
view
think.
is nobody.
Okay,
nobody really knows.
okay. All right, number 5. How do we know anything about that?
Salmon,
Absolutely.
steelhead.
Greenhorn Creek.
But I
trout.
mean, they're trying to get at who's in charge of all this. And we don't have, I think one of the proposals is an assessment of that, but we don't have anything except in the canyon and the FERC licenses. In the burn stuff, you guys do it, don't you, Brian?
Oh,
In the post-burn rehab, you do assessments of those kinds of things,
We're
right?
looking at it. We're looking at AOP, that kind of thing, aquatic organism passage, but
Doesn't Plumas Court have a bunch of that stuff, fish passage?
yeah, they do too.
Right.
Right.
But Mike's right that, you know, the major species are going to be your trout, salmon trout.
But just like we were looking at the stuff on roads, I don't think there's a full regional wide analysis of the scope of the road stream interactions and the problems that there are. I think to some extent there's been analyses done at a really detailed level that you can get to some of that, like the Last Chance Creek stuff, the Spanish Creek stuff that was done in 1990 or around there. But there's never been a regional-wide analysis of this.
That's correct. Okay,
So number 6, it'd be the Forest Service. It would be,
Stafford et al. 2012.
what?
Stafford et al. 2012.
Oh,
Probably
okay.
the one to cite.
Okay, great.
and I'm sure,
Who's doing that? Anybody? Anybody doing number 7?
You know, you could probably cite the Cascade Province's climate change vulnerability assessment because they are talking about that.
Marion, this one?
Yeah,
Okay,
they're talking about more rain, plus snow, and the effect on species. Oak shifting plant species.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get through reading all of that.
doesn't California have the climate adaptation plan?
yes.
Yeah,
And
a lot of,
doesn't it talk about all these things?
Not at this regional level.
I don't know, I have to look, a lot of it have to do with sea level rise.
Oh, for number 6, there's also, you might take, put in Westerling et al. 2008.
Okay.
And that was that California commissioned report on climate change and wildfire and forest.
Okay, thank you. Because there's FRAP and all that other, those assessments on that, but they're supposed to pick that up. Yeah, they're supposed to pick all that up. We're supposed to talk about from our region, what do we see?
SNAP.
Trap
From the, I mean, they call all this stuff out.
Okay, you guys.
So the August meeting, the 21st, what it is, part of the meeting will be integration of all the work groups, and in the second part, the consultants working on the climate change will be here to have the meeting in the afternoon. We got very little response on their initial questions on climate change. This is why you're doing the exercise today. And there's another purpose to do the exercise today, not only to get a response, but to sensitize and to introduce the subjects across the process to all the people in the working groups, even those that vehemently don't believe that anything's happening. So the purpose is that when we have to address it, yes, and it's, you know, in my opinion, something's going on for sure, as everybody else agreed to today, but it's part of the planning process to try to hit on this early enough so that when we have that meeting, it'll be a fruitful meeting, and also for when the plan chapters start to come out. And it tells me I'm going to be reviewing a couple of them pretty soon. That will be something that we've all kind of been introduced to.
She doesn't get clobbered for bringing up things that nobody believes in.
So what date is this meeting?
The 21st is an all-day meeting, and it's at the fairgrounds. And the morning is the project integration part, and in the afternoon is the climate change workshop.
And there's a barbecue plan.
Barbecue in between.
That's August.
Yeah, August.
Okay, and then the 20th is the California Water Commission.
Now, do you feel comfortable with translating what we talked about here to absolutely dead bang convincing arguments to anybody on the committee on any one of these issues?
Absolutely not.
I mean, they all seem pretty straightforward. I just,
You know, the reality is that we've been publicly kind of addressing climate change since the Agenda 21 stuff blew up on the general plan update. The exposure's there. It's pretty amazing. You know, you've got some pretty die-hard conservatives that will never really want to address it very much, but there's quite a bit of discussion and openness about it.
And then the Pope weighed in, so.
Yeah, the Pope weighed in.
Yeah, I was actually planning on going through. He laid it out 1, 2,
He did a good
3,
job.
4.
I got
So
halfway
I'm just
through
going to
it.
pick 10 of them. And that talk about the fact that you're morally despicable if you don't believe it. And quote the Pope.
So one of the things I
That's a
did
bit
is there's a newsletter for planners called the California Planning newsletter for planners called the California Planning and Development Report, and it's the one newsletter that the department gets. And in their email newsletter, there was a link to the Pope's document. I downloaded it and provided it to Leah and the climate change consultants. We haven't gone so far as to put it on the featherriver.org website, but if anybody would like to have it in a PDF form that they can, I certainly have it.
It's great.
No, I'll
So you're going to provide me a copy of the brief, and I will email you a copy of that.
Okay, we're adjourned, you guys can get
What
it.
maps do we circle the projects on?
That one over there.
No, look, the one with the crayons on the table there. Thank you, guys. What an ordeal. Take some food to go. Nobody drink, you guys don't drink juice. I brought all this juice.
Jonathan did. Drinking tea.
Juice.
Juice.
I am positive juice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did. I think we did.
Did you sign that?
So I will wait.
Yeah.
Some people start.
You said you only had 2 terabytes.
I got something for everything. I wasn't gonna get the only cloud for Jibba card or anything.
Story about it, but I did get the products that were
Thank you. Okay, great.
stuff. I got all the areas.
Cool, you got the 41.
So we got
Yeah,
Yeah, and then we're also, we can just bring another drive.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah, do me a favor though, is if you use the 41 photo stuff, I'd really appreciate it if you cited, like your Sonic columns, just because, there are PSW partners that really went to the effort. They went to the National Archives and tracked down, the negatives and had them scanned, and then Jamie Lyerson really put her effort into trying to figure out what elevation to use for the camera, and there was some forensic work that went into that.
Out there, like tracking it down, like you're saying, archives, there's sources all over the place, different libraries, collections now. Okay,
So it would be Jamie Lyerson, Lyderson, Lyerson, and Brandon Collins.
Well, we've done
the
it
ones that really,
And they're doing route 2, right?
interesting research using.
So long, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, John. Take care. Thank you. I just want to make sure they get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd rather have a source on there than know where it came from, because that's great. Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'll contact all those guys. And
I'll talk to Carlos and see. Do you mind if I share your proposal with him?
no, not at all.
Okay, cool. I'm hoping to be down at McClellan next Tuesday.
I can see how that too could, when they do project integration between the workers, that could be super useful.
Well, hey, especially if we could help your project by saying, hey, we're gonna get so much more miles paid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can't make any guarantees, but I can ask.
Yes, definitely. Cool. Well, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate your help on that.
I'm excited about that. That's something that, especially with canopy cover driving so much of what we're doing right now, it just makes sense to me. People want to go out and use densitometers and whatnot to try to measure things, and it's like, why wouldn't we just use LiDAR? It's like, great.
Collected all
Sure.
Trying to stitch them
I'm
together.
trying to stitch multiple flights together, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Yeah,
All
one
right.
source. One source for them all.
So, Ryan? Well, both of you guys, I'm gonna be following up with you, okay?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay.
Because I got such a mixed message, I don't know.